Welcome to the Strategy Skills podcast. I'm your host, Chris Safarova. And today we have with us Dr. Bob Rosen, who is a psychologist, New York Times bestselling author. Bob, welcome.
My pleasure.
In studying other leaders, what do you think are the most common types of attachments?
Well, I think that there's a group of healthy leaders, but then the ones who struggle with ambition. They struggle with mistrust. They struggle with performance pressures from their boards. They have excessive worry. Sometimes they don't live a healthy lifestyle. And many of them are controlling and perfectionistic. So I think that there's a handful of attachments that are particularly relevant that we could talk about today for business people. One is the attachment to the future. One is the attachment to stability. One is the attachment to control. One is the attachment to perfection. And the other is the attachment to success.
Maybe let's start with success.
Yes, success. Well, when our desires for success turn into a compulsive need for achievement, we've got a real problem because we define success from the outside in based on other people's expectations and not our own. It's what we learn in business school, the difference between extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. And this is oftentimes driven by our fear of failure, which drives our attachment to success. So if you think you have an attachment to success, you might ask yourself, do you need to be successful to be happy? Do you feel that something is missing in your life? Are you envious? Are you envious of other people's achievements? The secret is to live abundantly, not with this scarcity mindset. And your attachment to success is remedied by the aspiration of abundance. You have everything that you need right now. And by practicing abundance, you can celebrate your achievements and also live a healthy, productive life. Because who you are drives what you do, not what you do defines who you are. So it's really important that you're not hijacked by the fear of inadequacy in the attachment to success. And there's lots of people who struggle with this. I had a colleague of mine, a woman who owned her own business, and she worked incredibly hard. She truly was a workaholic, but she used to brag about how many customers she had, how much money she was making. She was very stressed out, didn't exercise. And at 65, she dropped dead in her kitchen from a heart attack. And I believe that it was her attachment to being successful and showing that she was successful. So it's the guy who is constantly telling everybody about his bonus, or a woman who tells everybody in the neighborhood how many days she went to church, or it's the couple that are trying to buy a house that they can't afford in the neighborhood where the houses are more expensive than they can buy. So that's what an attachment to success does. I think all of these are grounded in fear. And fear comes in many shapes and sizes. And many of us don't like the feeling of fear. And so we try to run away from it. And there's a group of people that become attached to pleasure, whether it's alcohol or drugs or social media or shopping or overeating or sexually acting out. And oftentimes that is driven by the fear of being uncomfortable. And people don't like to feel uncomfortable. So they throw these pleasures at themselves to anesthetize the anxiety of the fear. And the only way to get over an attachment to fear, and the substance abuse pleasures have a biological basis. And most of those pleasures that I described, there's an imbalance of dopamine. So there's a biological reason why people get addicted. But there's also a psychological reason, and that is that they run away from uncomfortable feelings and they use their pleasures to protect them from them. So that's really an interesting attachment. There's one other attachment that I think leaders experience, and that is the attachment to self. And what happens with the attachment to self is that we are preoccupied with our own needs, our own thoughts, and our feelings. And sometimes leaders can get isolated. They can get self-absorbed, or they may even become selfish and don't realize that they are not the person responsible for the success of the organization, but all their employees are responsible for the success of their organizations. And many of our compensation programs actually reinforce the notion that they are the person who is personally responsible for everything successful in the organization. But by fearing intimacy and connection and living on an island of self-interest, they become attached to themselves. And that is not a good thing. And they need to learn empathy, and they need to choose love over fear, and they need to become more service-oriented to get out of this attachment to self. So all of them are underscored by fear.
Bob, and let's say you were developing a 1-week training for executives on how to identify and get rid of these attachments. What would you do during that training?
Well, I think there's 4 steps to getting rid of your attachments. The first thing that you want to do, and we have a premium detach assessment that you can take, and I would start that training with the assessment. And it's 24 questions, but it tells you which attachments are higher and lower. But when you discover what your attachments are, I think the first step is awareness and acceptance, is to be aware of how that attachment plays out in your life and what are the consequences, both in your personal life and your professional life. Then you have to accept them, because a lot of people will be defensive and they don't want to see themselves that way. So awareness and acceptance is the first step. The second step is to really drill down on the attachment itself. What is the why behind the attachment? What are the fears that get in the way of that attachment, that drive that attachment? Then the third step is aspiration. And aspiration is looking at a desired state, a vision of how you want to be without that attachment. And then lastly is to think about the actions that you would take in your personal and professional life. So I would stretch that experience over a week so that at the end of the week, people are seeing themselves without their attachments pursuing their aspirations.
Are there certain attachments that you identified where you're still figuring out how someone could effectively detach?
Well, one of the hardest attachments is the attachment to youth and aging. We all experience it. 20-somethings, 40-somethings, 80-somethings all experience some attachment to youth and aging. We play it out differently. Some are attached to youth. Some are attached to getting older. Some live unhealthy lifestyles. Some people are hypochondriacal and they think about their health all the time. But one of the things that we know is that most people 80% of people, I think, in surveys carry with them an internalized ageism. They have beliefs that old people are less than in some ways, and they focus on the degradation of aging rather than the exuberance and the possibility of aging. So that becomes very, very important. Many older people are scared of death. They're scared of dying. They're scared of changes in their lifestyle. And after we retire, and retirement is a very hard thing for a lot of business people because they shift their role. Now, some people want to work for the rest of their lives, and some people are totally comfortable going to the golf course, and all of those things are fine and possible. But when you retire, you're given an opportunity to walk on two paths. One path is a path of introspection. It's a path of possibility. It's a path that allows you to accept the world as it is, to not be so critical of yourself, and to be more mature and be wiser and teach other people. And then the other path is a path driven by fear and pain. And you choose. You choose consciously, oftentimes unconsciously, which path you want to walk. And the people who walk on the former path are generally happier. Now, what's interesting is that older people are actually healthier, happier, and emotionally healthier than other generations because they're freed up from the shackles of stressful living. There's great possibility here, but many of us are attached to this internalized ageism that gets in the way. And I'm still, going through that. And I think everybody is going through that.
Can you talk to us more about the exuberance and possibility of aging? Because I think people really need to hear that. I think if we could go a little bit deeper, because I think it is a very, very important topic and people don't speak enough about it. You mentioned that people don't focus enough on the side of aging that is about possibilities that aging opens up for someone.
One of the positive things of aging is that we become less critical of ourselves if we allow ourselves to do it. We allow our bodies to deteriorate. There's a Japanese concept called wabi-sabi, which is the beauty of imperfection. And everything degrades and deteriorates. Ideas, businesses, people, plants, pets. It's just a natural process of deterioration. The other thing that many of us have is an attachment to life. We don't see that life is full of births and losses and deaths throughout life. And so we're never comfortable with the ups and downs of life rather than seeing that it's okay to deteriorate. It's okay to lose functioning. It's okay to get gray hair. It's okay to wear glasses or to to use hearing aids. I have a hearing aid. And you just begin to accept those things. I remember I was diagnosed with atrial fibrillation at age 42. And a couple years ago, I got a pacemaker. Well, you have to make peace with these transitions and to recognize that each one is a loss, but it's also a gain in some ways. It's a possibility, and that really healthy adults focus on this. I learned a lot about this as a gay man going through the AIDS crisis because I saw a lot of my friends, two of my best friends, die. And there was a lot of prejudice at the time in the 80s and a lot of isolation. And funerals happened 2 weeks after people got HIV disease. There were no medications there. And you really learned about the power of prejudice and the importance of community and things like that. And it was the real catalyst for people to come out of the closet, because people were going home and telling their families not only that they were gay, but they were sick and dying. And so it really brought gay and lesbian people out of the closet. And that was all a possibility. So here was a major loss that became a possibility from a societal perspective. I guess the last thing I would say is that death is very scary for a lot of people, and they worry about the pain of deterioration, of ill health, and death. But older people who are not attached to age think about death as the next phase of their life. They may be religion, they may be not of life, just of existence. We used to go out to dinner, my husband and I, with two elderly people in their 90s. And they stopped watching television because they didn't want the stress. And they also made a commitment not to engage in expensive health care at the end of their lives, which, they were 92 and 93. They had made peace with death. I have a friend, her story is in the book. Her name is Amy, and she runs a progressive green burial company. And she says that many times grief continues for the rest of your life when you lose somebody. And so we need to think a lot more about talking about death and dying and giving ourselves permission to make that another step in the evolution of life.
For someone listening right now who has a fear of death and would like to find peace, what advice could you give them?
I think one is, and Eric Erikson, the great psychologist, said that the last phase of life, you have two paths to take. One is a path of regret, and one is a path of gratitude. And toward the end of your life, it's really healthier for people to say, I lived a good life. There may have been things that I didn't achieve. There may have been trip-ups that I made, but overall, I had a good life. And the research at Harvard on adult development says that having a good life is having good relationships with other people. And so I would really focus on great relationships in that last trimester of life. And then to recognize that death is just part of the evolution. And some people are spiritual, and some people believe in God and they believe in heaven. Other people believe that when they die, they are cremated and they become part of nature, and the interconnectedness of all living things. But I do think that death is just a step, the next step, and to live in gratitude, not regret, because regret can be a devastating feeling.
Yes, it is an unbearable feeling, and it causes so much suffering.
Exactly. It's a lot of suffering rather than enjoying that last phase of life. Ram Dass, the great sort of philosopher of the world, says that you don't want to be attached to life and you don't want to be attached to death. And the freer you are, the easier it is to die.
Bob, I will ask now my favorite question. Over the last few years, what were 2-3 aha moments, realizations that really changed the way you look at life or the way you look at business?
Wow, what a great question. One is certainly coming out of the closet and being a gay man. There's something very powerful about looking into the mirror when I was in my late teens, and falling in love with myself as a gay man and not being a faggot that people described gay people as in society at that time. And it built up a self-love that is non-negotiable. And so I can get hit by lots of arrows, but no one can take away my self-love. And self-love is, I think, one of the most important qualities and attributes of a healthy person. Not narcissism, not excessive narcissism, but self-love. So that's the first thing. I would say the second thing was just what's happened to my heart, and learning about the vulnerability. And then I remember when I first was diagnosed with atrial fib, I was so anxious because, the mind and the emotional brain and the heart are only 18 inches away from each other. And so I had to make peace with that. And then the last thing I bet was my opiate addiction, and recognizing that I had to acknowledge all of the human emotions, particularly my difficult emotions, my burnout. I would run a company and write a book at the same time, which is crazy. It's really hard to do. And I would just get burned out. And I think since I've been sober for the last 4 years, it's really helped me. Now, if you notice those three things, they were all troublesome crises that I experienced. And I think people learn most about themselves from falling down. Doing your work, loving yourself, getting up, putting a Band-Aid on your knee, and moving forward. And there's interesting research that says that people between 15 and 25 who don't experience some kind of life crisis, their boyfriend or girlfriend leaves them, or they fall down and get in a car accident, whatever it is, if they don't have a mishap like that, they are very vulnerable to falling apart at age 50. Because that's what life brings us. It brings us ups and downs and pleasures and anxieties, and we just need to accept that that's what life is.
Bob, thank you so much. I really appreciated your answer and what you shared on aging and the rest of your work. Where can our listeners learn more about you, buy your book, anything you want to share?
Oh, that's lovely. My website is bobrosen.com, www.bobrosen.com. And on there you can find the podcasts that I've been doing. You get access to the assessment, as well as a detached book club in a box. I envision people reading the attachments, sharing their personal attachments, and there's a facilitator guide in there and the like, and that should be up probably by the end of the month.
Thank you again for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
Our guest today again has been Dr. Bob Rosen. Check out his book. It's called Detach. And our podcast sponsor today is strategytraining.com. If you want to strengthen your strategy skills, you can get the overall approach used in well-managed strategy studies. It's a free download, and you can get it at firmsconsulting.com/overall approach. You can also get McKinsey and BCG winning resume, which is a resume that got offers from both of those firms. And you can get it at firmsconsulting.com/resume PDF. And you can also get a copy of a book we co-authored with some of our amazing listeners and clients. And you can get it at firmsconsulting.com/gift. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I'm looking forward to connect with you all next time.